"Get out of my house, you useless old man." My own son, Blake, screamed those words at me while his wife Amber smirked from behind him. After I'd just handed over the deed to the house I'd built with my own 2 hands. The same house where I'd raised him, taught him to ride a bike, helped with homework every night for 12 years. You won't believe how this sweet father-son relationship turned into the most satisfying revenge I've ever served. But before I tell you how I completely destroyed Blake's comfortable life, smash that subscribe button, because justice stories like this don't come around often. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. 3 months earlier, everything seemed perfect. I was Hal Peterson, 68 years old, recently retired from my job as a construction foreman. My wife Dorothy had passed 2 years ago, and I was still adjusting to life alone in our 4-bedroom house on Elm Street. Blake had always been my pride and joy. Star quarterback in high school, full scholarship to college, married his college sweetheart Amber. When he graduated with his business degree, I helped him get started by co-signing his first apartment lease and buying him a reliable car. "Dad, you've done so much for us," he'd say during our weekly dinners. "I don't know how I'll ever repay you." I'd wave him off. "That's what fathers do, son. Family takes care of family." The house on Elm Street wasn't just any house. It was my masterpiece. I designed and built it myself in 1987, right after Dorothy and I got married. Every beam, every tile, every fixture had been chosen with care. The wraparound porch where Dorothy used to sit with her morning coffee. The stone fireplace I'd built by hand using rocks from our honeymoon trip to Colorado. The kitchen island where Blake had done his homework while Dorothy cooked dinner. This wasn't just property. This was our legacy. When Blake and Amber announced they were expecting their first child, I was over the moon. A grandfather. I immediately started converting Dorothy's old craft room into a nursery for when they'd visit. I painted it soft yellow, built custom shelves for toys and books, and hung the mobile Dorothy had made before she passed. "Dad, you're going to spoil that baby rotten." Blake laughed as he watched me install safety plugs in every outlet. "That's what grandfathers are for," I replied, imagining little hands reaching for everything they shouldn't touch. But then the requests started getting bigger. "Dad, the apartment is too small for a baby," Blake mentioned one evening over dinner at Rossi's, our usual Thursday spot. "Amber's been looking at houses, but with my student loans and the baby expenses coming." Without hesitation, I offered to help with the down payment. $25,000 from my retirement savings. Money I'd planned to use for travel, maybe a fishing cabin up north. "Every child deserves a good start," I told him, signing the check right there at the restaurant table. Blake's eyes got teary. "Dad, I promise we'll pay you back as soon as we're on our feet. Don't worry about it, son. That's what family does." A few months later, the requests continued. "Dad, Amber quit her job to stay home with the baby. Money's tight. Could you help with the mortgage for a few months? Just until I get that promotion at work." I said yes. Of course I said yes. $1,500 a month for what Blake promised would be maybe 3 months, tops. Then it was car payments when Blake's old Honda finally died. "Dad, I need reliable transportation for work and the baby. This dealership has a great financing deal, but they want a co-signer with good credit." Another yes. Another signature. Another $500 a month. Then credit card bills when Amber's medical complications led to unexpected expenses not covered by insurance. "Dad, we're drowning here. Just this once, and then we'll get our finances sorted out." $3,000 to pay off their cards, with promises to be more responsible. Each time, Blake would promise it was temporary. Each time, Amber would smile sweetly and thank me profusely, bouncing little Bobby on her hip. Each time, I told myself that helping family was the right thing to do. But deep down, a small voice was starting to whisper warnings. Dorothy used to say, "Hal, there's a difference between helping someone up and letting them drag you down." I was beginning to understand what she meant. Have you ever had someone take advantage of your kindness? Let me know in the comments. But Blake was about to cross a line that would cost him everything. It happened on a Tuesday morning in October. I was drinking coffee on my front porch, watching the maple tree in my yard turn brilliant red, Dorothy's favorite time of year. Blake's BMW pulled into my driveway at exactly 9:30. He'd called the night before asking if he could drop by to discuss something important. He got out with a leather folder in his hand and that serious expression he wore when he wanted something big. The same look he'd had when he asked to borrow my truck for prom, or when he needed help with college tuition. But something felt different this time. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, not even sitting down in the chair next to me. "What's on your mind, son?" He opened the folder and pulled out legal documents, the kind with official letterheads and lots of fine print. "Amber and I have been thinking. This house is way too big for just you. You're getting older, Dad. What if something happens and no one's around to help?" I frowned, setting down my coffee mug. The one Dorothy had made in her pottery class. "I'm fine, Blake. This is my home. But it's not practical," he pressed on, his voice taking on a tone I'd never heard before. Impatient, almost condescending. "Look at this place. 4 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, huge yard. You barely use half the space. And the maintenance costs must be killing you." I wanted to point out that I'd built this house with my own hands, that I knew every pipe and wire better than most people knew their own names. But something in his expression stopped me. "We found this nice senior community about an hour away," he continued, pulling out glossy brochures. "Sunset Manor. All your needs taken care of. Meals, housekeeping, even transportation to doctor's appointments. No more yard work, no more maintenance headaches, no more worrying about being alone." The brochures showed smiling elderly people playing chess and doing watercolor paintings. It looked pleasant enough, but it wasn't home. He slid the papers across my patio table. "We can handle selling this place for you. Take care of all the paperwork. Deal with the stress of real estate agents and inspections. All you have to do is sign." My hands trembled as I looked at the documents. Power of attorney forms giving Blake complete control over my financial decisions. A pre-filled application for Sunset Manor Senior Living. They'd already put down a deposit. And there, at the bottom of the pile, a deed transfer form. "You want me to sign over my house?" I whispered. "It's for your own good, Dad. The house is worth about $400,000 now, maybe more with the market being so hot. After we pay off your medical bills and the money you've lent us over the years, there should be enough left for your senior living costs for quite a while." The money I'd lent them? When had helping my family become a debt to be collected? "Medical bills?" I asked. "I don't have any medical bills. Medicare covers everything, and I have supplemental insurance." Blake shifted uncomfortably. "Well, future medical bills. You know how expensive healthcare gets at your age." "I need time to think about this," I said carefully. Blake's face hardened, and for a moment, I saw something that chilled me to the bone. He looked exactly like his mother's brother, my former brother-in-law who tried to cheat Dorothy out of her inheritance when her father died. "Dad, I'm trying to help you here. Don't make this difficult." Difficult? I'd raised this boy from diapers, taught him to drive in this very driveway, helped him with every major decision of his life. And now I was being difficult? But that's not even the worst part. That evening, after Blake left, I sat in Dorothy's chair and really looked at those documents. Something bothered me beyond just the emotional betrayal. In 40-plus years of construction work, I'd read thousands of contracts, permits, and legal documents. These papers felt wrong somehow. What Blake didn't know was that I had been managing construction projects and reading legal contracts since before he was born. I knew when something smelled fishy, and these documents reeked. That evening, I called my old friend Walter Brennan, who'd worked as a real estate lawyer for 35 years before retiring. Walter and I had served together on the City Planning Commission back in the 90s, and I trusted his judgment completely. "Al, you called just in time," he said after I described the documents Blake had shown me. "I was just thinking about Dorothy the other day, saw her favorite roses blooming in Millie's garden. But listen, don't sign anything yet. Can you bring those papers by tomorrow?" The next morning, I drove to Walter's office. He still kept a small practice for friends and emergencies. His expression grew darker as he read through each page, occasionally muttering under his breath. "This isn't about helping you, Hal. Look at this clause here." He pointed to fine print buried in the middle of page 3. "They're not planning to put any proceeds toward your care. They're asking you to gift them the house directly." My blood ran cold. "What? And this power of attorney document? It gives them complete control over all your assets, not just the house. Your retirement accounts, your savings, your life insurance, everything. Once you sign this, Blake could legally drain every account you have." I felt sick. But Blake said the money would go toward my care at the senior facility. Blake said what he needed to say. "Look here." Walter flipped to another page. "This application for Sunset Manor? It's for their basic care package, about $1,800 a month. Your house is worth at least $400,000, probably more. Even after taxes and fees, that's enough to pay for luxury care for the rest of your life. But that's not what's happening here. He spread out a calculator and started running numbers. If I'm reading this right, they're planning to use your house as collateral for their own mortgage, then stick you in the cheapest care facility they can find. I stared at the documents, seeing them clearly for the first time. My own son. I'm sorry, Hal, but your son is trying to steal your house. Legally, but it's still theft. That afternoon, I did something I never thought I'd have to do with my own child. I went to Radio Shack and bought a small digital recorder, the kind people use for taking notes in meetings. If Blake was really planning to betray me this deeply, I needed proof. I also made some calls to people who might have information I needed. First, I called my nephew Curtis, who ran a successful accounting firm over in Millbrook. Curtis, I need a favor, and I need you to keep it quiet. Can you run a credit check on Blake? I think he might be in financial trouble. Curtis hesitated. Uncle Hal, that's... Well, it's not exactly ethical. Curtis, I think he's trying to steal my house. I need to know what I'm dealing with. Jesus. Okay, give me his full name and social security number. I'll see what I can find out unofficially. Second call was to my old foreman, Pete Martinez, who now worked for the city planning office. Pete, I need to know about any recent building permits or zoning changes on my side of town, specifically around Elm Street. That's public record. Hal, what are you looking for? Anything that might affect property values. Someone's been asking a lot of questions about my house, and I want to know why. Third call was to my insurance agent, Doris Fleming, who'd handled my policies for 20 years. Doris, if someone had power of attorney over my finances, could they change my life insurance beneficiaries? Well, yes, technically. Hal, is everything all right? I'm not sure yet. Can you put a note on my file that no changes should be made without speaking to me directly first? I didn't have to wait long for the recorder to prove useful. 2 days later, Blake and Amber showed up unannounced around dinner time. I activated the recorder and invited them in, offering to make coffee. Dad, have you thought about what we discussed? Blake asked, spreading the papers on my coffee table again. The same table Dorothy had refinished by hand 20 years ago. I have some concerns, I said carefully. Maybe we could modify some of the terms. There's nothing to modify. Amber snapped, dropping her sweet act completely. You're being selfish, Hal, keeping this big house while we're crammed into that tiny place with a baby. Blake shot her a warning look, but she was just getting started. My friends are embarrassed for me, living in a 2-bedroom rental while my father-in-law sits alone in this mansion. Do you know what that feels like? Amber, Blake warned. No, Blake, he needs to hear this. We've done everything right, college, good jobs, saving money. But we can't get ahead because we're supporting him and paying for this house he doesn't even need. Supporting me? I was the one who'd been paying their bills for over a year. Amber's right, Dad, Blake said, his voice harder now. We need this house. You don't. It's time to be realistic about your situation. But where would I live? I asked. The senior place we showed you. Or there's a cheaper option about 2 hours away, Peaceful Acres. Either way, you need to accept that you're not capable of living independently anymore. What happened next shocked everyone. Actually, I said quietly, reaching for a pen, I've decided you're right. Blake and Amber exchanged excited looks, and I saw something in their faces that made my stomach turn. Pure greed. I'm glad you're being reasonable, Dad, Blake said, barely containing his satisfaction. As I pretended to read through the documents one more time, I asked casually, by the way, what's your timeline for this transition? Amber couldn't help herself. Well, we already put in an offer on the house we want. The sellers are waiting to hear if our financing comes through. Financing? Blake cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable for the first time. We're using this house as collateral for a bigger loan. Get something really nice, you know? For bedrooms, big yard for Bobby to grow up in. They weren't just stealing my house. They were using it to buy their dream home while sticking me in the cheapest care facility they could find. How much is this new house? I asked innocently. $750,000, Amber said proudly. It's in Willowbrook Estates, you know, where all the executives live. Blake deserves a house that reflects his success. Blake's success, built on my money and now my home. By the time I was done gathering evidence over the next few days, I had enough to expose their entire scheme to the family and the community. But that wasn't enough. I wanted them to understand what it felt like to lose everything they'd counted on. Little did they know, I was just getting started. What would you have done at this point? Justice or mercy? Comment below. That night, I made a series of phone calls that would change everything. First, I called Walter back. I need you to draw up new documents. A proper will, and I want to establish an irrevocable trust. Smart move, Hal. What are your instructions? Put the house in the trust. Name little Bobby as the beneficiary when he turns 25. Until then, I maintain full control and lifetime residence rights. Also, I want specific language that prevents the property from being used as collateral for any loans. That's bulletproof, Hal. Once it's in the trust, Blake can't touch it. What else? New power of attorney documents naming you as my agent, not Blake. And I want to establish a separate account for any future family assistance, with strict limits and documentation requirements. While Walter worked on the legal documents, Curtis called back with disturbing news about Blake's finances. Uncle Hal, this is worse than I thought. Blake's in serious financial trouble. He's 3 months behind on his mortgage and maxed out on 5 credit cards. That BMW? Leased, and he's behind on those payments too. How bad is it? He's looking at bankruptcy within 6 months unless something major happens. His debt-to-income ratio is insane. He's paying almost 60% of his gross income just in minimum payments. What about his job? That's another problem. I did some digging. He's been with Morrison Insurance for less than a year, and he's still in his probationary period. If they find out about his financial situation, they could let him go without cause. Curtis paused. Uncle Hal, there's something else. He's been telling creditors that he's expecting a large inheritance soon. He's been using that promise to negotiate payment delays. My own son had been counting my death as part of his financial planning. Pete's information was even more revealing. Hal, you hit the jackpot with that property question. The whole north side of Elm Street is being rezoned commercial next year. The city's planning a major development project, mixed-use buildings with retail on the ground floor and condos above. What does that mean for property values? Your house is sitting on prime real estate, buddy. Once the rezoning goes through, developers will be falling over themselves to buy properties in that area. I'd estimate your place will be worth at least $1 million, maybe more. Suddenly, everything made perfect sense. Blake hadn't just stumbled onto the idea of taking my house. He'd been planning this for months, knowing that my property was about to become incredibly valuable. The timing of his sudden concern for my well-being coincided perfectly with the city's development timeline. But how had Blake found out about the rezoning? I made one more call to find out. Hey Pete, who would have access to those development plans before they become public? Well, anyone who works in real estate, city planning, or has connections to the development companies. Why? Blake works for Morrison Insurance. They handle commercial property insurance, don't they? Oh hell. Yeah, Morrison handles insurance for half the commercial developments in the county. Blake would have seen those plans months ago. They thought they were dealing with a lonely old man who didn't understand modern real estate and city politics. They were about to learn they had messed with someone who'd been reading development plans and construction contracts since before Blake learned to read. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I didn't need to do anything illegal or even particularly clever. I just needed to let Blake dig his own grave a little deeper while I built an unshakable legal fortress around my assets. But I also wanted to make sure the whole community understood exactly what kind of people Blake and Amber really were. A week later, Blake called in a panic. Dad, we need those papers signed today. The deadline for our house offer is tomorrow, and the sellers are getting impatient. Of course, son. Why don't you and Amber come for dinner tonight? We can take care of everything then, and I'll cook Dorothy's famous pot roast recipe. That sounds perfect, Dad. Thank you for understanding. Understanding. If only he knew how well I understood. That afternoon, I made final preparations. The recording device was ready. Walter's new documents were locked in my safe, and I'd invited a few people to drop by later in the evening. People Blake wouldn't expect to see. Blake and Amber arrived promptly at 6, documents in hand and fake smiles plastered on their faces. This smells amazing, Dad, Blake said, actually seeming nervous for the first time. Just like Mom used to make. I thought you'd appreciate that, I said, wondering if he felt any guilt at all about trying to steal the house where his mother had spent her happiest years. Over dinner, I let them think everything was going according to plan. I asked about little Bobby, complimented Amber's new haircut, and made small talk about Blake's job. "So tell me about this new house you're buying," I said innocently as I served apple pie, another of Dorothy's recipes. Amber lit up like Christmas morning. "Oh, Mr. Peterson, it's absolutely gorgeous. 5 bedrooms, 3-car garage, pool in the backyard, granite countertops throughout. It's in Willowbrook Estates, you know, where Judge Harrison and Dr. Matthews live. It's everything we've dreamed of." "Sounds expensive." Blake shifted uncomfortably. "Well, that's why we need to make this transition quickly, Dad. Real estate moves fast these days, and interest rates are starting to go up. How much are you borrowing against my house?" "Well," Blake hesitated. "The loan amount is $600,000. But don't worry. After we sell your house, we'll pay off the loan and still have money left over for your care." $600,000 against a house they expected to be worth over $1 million within a year. They were planning to steal $500,000 from me. After dinner, they spread the papers on my dining room table again. The same table where Blake had done homework, where Dorothy and I had paid bills and planned our future, where we'd hosted dozens of family dinners and holiday celebrations. This time, I read through every single page carefully while they waited, fidgeting like children on Christmas morning. "This all looks fine," I finally said. "But I've been thinking about what you said regarding taxes and protecting family assets. I want to make one small change." "What kind of change?" Blake asked warily. I pulled out the new documents Walter had prepared. "I want to transfer the house into a trust instead. Better for tax purposes, protects the family assets from potential creditors." Amber grabbed Blake's arm. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means the house stays in the family forever, just like Blake wanted. The only difference is that little Bobby will inherit it when he turns 25, instead of Blake getting it directly. Meanwhile, I maintain lifetime residence rights and full control over any decisions about the property." Blake's face went white. "Dad, that doesn't work for our timeline." "Why not? You said this was about my well-being and keeping the house in the family. The trust accomplishes both of those goals." The room fell silent. I could practically see the wheels turning in their heads as they realized their scheme was falling apart. But the real surprise came when I pulled out my phone and played the recording from their last visit. "You're being selfish, Hal, keeping this big house while we're crammed into that tiny place." Amber's voice filled the room. "My friends are embarrassed for me." Then Blake's voice. "We need this house. You don't. It's time to be realistic about your situation." Their faces went from confusion to horror as they realized what they were hearing. "You recorded us?" Blake whispered. "I documented conversations in my own home," I corrected calmly. "Just like I documented your real financial situation." I spread out Curtis's report on the table. Bank statements, credit reports, foreclosure notices. "You're 3 months behind on your mortgage, Blake. 5 maxed out credit cards. Bankruptcy is inevitable whether you get my house or not. But that's not even the worst part. This is where it gets really good." I pulled out Pete's city planning documents. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out about the rezoning? This whole neighborhood is going commercial next year. My house will be worth over $1 million, and you knew it when you started planning this theft." Amber started crying, but they were tears of frustration, not remorse. Blake just stared at the papers in shock. "You weren't trying to help me, son. You were trying to steal my retirement and use it to fund your lifestyle upgrade. But you forgot something important. You forgot who taught you how to read contracts and plan ahead. But wait, there's more. I've already spoken to Morrison Insurance about their policy regarding employees with undisclosed financial problems," I continued. "Amazing how concerned they become when they learn that one of their agents has been using inside information about city development projects for personal gain." Blake shot to his feet. "You called my boss." "I called their ethics hotline. Anonymously, of course. Funny thing about ethics hotlines, they take reports very seriously, especially when they involve potential conflicts of interest." That's when the doorbell rang. "Excuse me," I said, walking to the front door. I invited a few people over to witness the signing of these important documents. I opened the door to reveal Walter, Curtis, and Pete, along with my neighbor Helen Morrison, who happened to be Blake's boss's wife, and Reverend Thomas from our church, who'd known Blake since he was baptized. "Come in, everyone," I said loudly enough for Blake and Amber to hear. I was just explaining to Blake why I've decided to put the house in a trust instead of signing it over directly. The witnesses filed into my dining room, where Blake and Amber sat frozen in mortification. "Blake," Reverend Thomas said warmly, "your father tells me you're concerned about his living situation. How thoughtful of you to help with the arrangements." "Actually," I said, "Blake was just explaining how he planned to use my house as collateral for a $700,000 loan while placing me in a budget care facility 2 hours away." The room went dead silent. Helen Morrison looked at Blake with barely concealed disgust. "Is this true?" That's when he screamed the words that would haunt our relationship forever. "Get out of my house, you useless old man. This is all your fault for being too stupid to understand what's best for you." The irony was beautiful. He was calling it his house in the same breath as calling me Usselsadge. The house I'd built with my own hands. The house I still legally owned. The house he'd never get now. In front of his boss's wife, our pastor, and respected members of the community, Blake had just revealed his true character for everyone to see. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Helen Morrison excused herself immediately, but not before telling Blake, "I'll be speaking to my husband first thing Monday morning." Reverend Thomas looked at Blake with deep disappointment. "Son, I've known you since you were in diapers. This isn't the man your mother raised you to be." After everyone left, Blake tried to salvage the situation one last time. "Dad, I was just frustrated. You know I didn't mean those things. We can work this out. Maybe adjust the terms of the arrangement. The only arrangement we need is for you to gather up these fraudulent documents and leave my house," I said calmly. "And Blake, don't come back until you're ready to apologize sincerely for trying to steal from your own father." Amber was still crying, but now she was angry. "You've ruined everything. We're going to lose our house because of your selfishness. You're going to lose your house because you spent money you didn't have and tried to steal from family to cover your debts," I replied. "That's not my fault, and it's not my problem." The next morning, Blake called me crying. "Dad, I'm sorry. I was scared about our financial situation and made terrible decisions. Please, can we work something out? Bobby needs stability." "Blake, you looked me in the eye and called me useless while trying to defraud me out of my life's work. In front of witnesses. Some things can't be taken back. But what are we supposed to do? The eviction notice comes next week. You're supposed to face the consequences of your choices like an adult. Get a second job, file for bankruptcy, ask Amber's parents for help. I don't care. But you're not stealing my house to solve problems you created." Over the next few weeks, the consequences kept rolling in like dominoes falling. Blake's mortgage company reported the attempted fraud to other lenders, making it impossible for him to get financing anywhere else. The luxury house deal fell through, and they lost their $5,000 deposit. Morrison Insurance conducted an internal investigation into Blake's use of inside information and his undisclosed financial problems. They terminated his employment during his probationary period, citing failure to meet company standards for ethical conduct. Word spread through our small town quickly. Dorothy and I had been respected members of the community for 40 years, active in the church, involved in local charities, known as honest, hard-working people. The contrast with Blake's behavior was stark and shameful. At the grocery store, our neighbor Helen Patterson approached me with tears in her eyes. "Al, I heard what Blake tried to do. I'm so sorry. After everything you've done for that boy, and especially after losing Dorothy, it's just heartbreaking." Even Blake's old friends started distancing themselves. When you're known as the guy who tried to steal his widowed father's house while calling him useless, people stop trusting you with their business, their friendships, their respect. The manager at Blake's bank, where I'd been a customer for 30 years, called to express his concern. "Mr. Peterson, I want you to know that we've flagged your accounts for extra security. If anyone tries to access them or use them as collateral without your direct, in-person authorization, we'll contact you immediately." 3 months later, I got a call from Amber's mother, Patricia. "Mr. Peterson, I know this is awkward, but Blake and Amber are living with us temporarily. They wanted me to ask, is there any way you might reconsider helping them? For Bobby's sake." "Patricia," I said respectfully, "I spent 30 years helping Blake become the man he chose to be. I co-signed loans, paid bills, gave gifts, and offered guidance whenever he needed it. That help ended the moment he looked me in the eye and called me useless while trying to steal my home. But Bobby is just a baby. He doesn't deserve to suffer for his parents' mistakes. You're absolutely right. Bobby deserves better than parents who would steal from his grandfather." The trust I've established will ensure that house stays in the family for Bobby when he turns 25. Until then, Blake and Amber need to learn how to provide for their child without stealing from family. 6 months after that terrible dinner, I saw Blake at the grocery store. He was thinner, tired-looking, wearing a uniform from a local landscaping company, apparently his new job after being fired from the insurance agency. He was pushing a cart with generic brands and counting coupons. He saw me and started to approach, then stopped. What could he say? How do you make small talk with the father you tried to defraud? I nodded politely and continued shopping. A year later, I heard through the community grapevine that Blake and Amber had divorced. The stress of bankruptcy, job loss, and social embarrassment had destroyed their marriage. Blake was living in a studio apartment and working 2 jobs, the landscaping company during the day and stocking shelves at night. Amber had moved back in with her parents permanently and was working at a daycare center. She'd started telling people that the whole thing had been Blake's idea, that she'd never wanted to hurt me. The house I'd built with my own hands remained mine, growing more valuable each month as the neighborhood development progressed. Little Bobby would inherit a property worth well over $1 million when he turned 25, a real head start in life, unlike the debt and shame his parents had given him. And Blake learned the hardest lesson of his life. Respect your elders, especially when they're the ones who taught you everything you know. But the story doesn't end there. 2 years after the confrontation, I received an unexpected visitor. Blake stood on my front porch, hat in hand, looking genuinely humble for the first time since he'd become an adult. "Dad," he said quietly, "I know I have no right to ask, but could we talk? Just for a few minutes." I considered closing the door, but something in his voice, genuine remorse, maybe, made me step aside. "I've been going to counseling," he said, sitting in the same chair where he'd tried to manipulate me into signing away my house. "Learning about addiction, not to drugs or alcohol, but to easy money and shortcuts. I realize now that's what I became addicted to." He looked around the room, at the pictures of Dorothy, at the handmade furniture and carefully maintained home. "I was so focused on what I wanted that I forgot who you are. You're not just my father. You're the man who built this house with his bare hands, who worked 60-hour weeks to provide for us, who taught me the value of hard work and honest dealing. And I threw all of that away for money." I listened without interrupting. "I can't undo what I did," he continued. "I can't take back calling you useless or trying to steal your home. But I want you to know that I understand now how wrong I was, and I'm sorry. Not because I want something from you, but because you deserved better from the son you raised." For the first time in 2 years, Blake sounded like the boy I'd raised instead of the greedy stranger he'd become. "I appreciate you saying that," I told him. "It doesn't change what happened, but it's a start. Justice was served, and karma had the final word. But maybe, just maybe, there was room for redemption too." Sometimes the people closest to us forget where their blessings come from. Blake thought he could manipulate his old man and steal his life's work. Instead, he lost everything: his house, his job, his reputation, his marriage, and his relationship with his father. The irony?
If this story got you thinking, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that hit deep, and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear this one, share it with them. Thanks for watching.